trying to forget not to record like I've done before. So anyway, how long did you have off? 3 weeks? 4 weeks? What's it been? Something like that?
3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. You guys at OTC have longer semesters than the college that I also teach at, Douglas College in Vancouver. They have an HIS program, and it's 2 weeks shorter. It's only like 13 weeks, and I'm thinking, why am I trying to cram in everything? And it's, because I teach the same courses over there. Thing is, OTC has 2 weeks longer. You got 15 weeks, they got 13. Don't know what's the matter with those people. Canadians, you can't trust them. So, you've been working in the summer or what? Doing what? Sam, what have you been down to?
I still work at the clinic that I'm currently at. So
okay, good.
Doing a lot of, he's helped me out more with fittings and stuff. He's had me sit in with them, and I've actually gotten to do a few myself. So that's kind of getting more experience there.
I guess this is now you're on the downward slope of a 2-year program, which is nice. Mm-hmm. And how about you, Audra? What have you been up to?
Working. I took a short trip out to California to see some family. But, 3 weeks isn't long enough to...
No, it isn't.
To get out of a habit, so.
It's like almost a full 12 months program. How about you, Angela?
I went to the lake for 2 weeks. I'm a new girl.
Cool. What lake did you go to?
I went up to Palm de Tar. My folks run that campground up there at Dam Site, and it's very relaxing.
Sounds like you were swearing at that damn site.
Yes, I had a damn burger. I met some damn nice people.
What I always remember from living in Oklahoma is when you were flying over it, the lakes always looked like Christmas trees. And I thought, that's because they're man-made lakes. They're dammed up and they're man-made. They're not like round lakes like you have here. They're all like Christmas trees. Oh, geez.
What did you do, Doctor?
Well, we took a road trip to the province of Alberta, which is just north of Montana, and near the edge of the Rocky Mountains there. And we visited what we call a Festival of Friends, people that we'd met out in the city of Calgary years ago, like 30-some years ago, and we all met up and had a big reunion. So that was neat. That was cool. Spent about 10 days out that way, so it was good. But now back in the salt mines, I'll tell you what, I'll show you what it is what we're going to look at this semester, just kind of an overview. We'll just make today sort of kind of an overview type of thing. If I share a screen here and we look at our units. This week, next week, maybe the week after, we'll all be in Unit 1. And we're going to look at what they call linear versus compression. That's this Word document, this PowerPoint. Next week, we'll look at this Word document, this PowerPoint. And the purpose is to get you to read how to read what we call input-output functions. And hearing aids, as you may recall, input plus gain is output. It's a simple 1 plus 2 is 3. Input's the sound coming into your mic. Gain is what your hearing aid's doing. And output is the sum total of the two. Then we'll get into what they call OLC versus WDRC. Now, those are two types of compression. And actually, when you're thinking about compression, there's two main branches. One's for mild to moderate loss, one's for severe. One's for sensory loss, one's for neural loss. Okay? One type of compression is focused on amplifying soft sounds. Imitate the outer hair cells. Amplify soft sounds. Because that's what the person's got wrong with him or her. Excuse me. I just ate breakfast. Sorry about that. Anyway, the person just got damage to the outer hair cells, so he has a mild hearing loss. So let's make the hearing aid imitate what the outer hair cells used to do. Let's make the hearing aid focus on amplifying soft sounds. So the focus of the hearing aid is the floor. And then let's have the hearing aid do nothing for loud sounds, just amplify normally, but really amplify soft. Then you get the person with severe loss. And that person has damage to both outer and inner hair cells. So he or she has a severe hearing loss. And that way, that hearing aid is going to be powerful, of course, because he's got like an 80 decibel hearing loss. But your whole focus of the compression in this case is the ceiling. You want to make sure the hearing aid doesn't amplify and cause more hair cell damage. Okay, so the focus of output limiting compression, OLC, is found on high power hearing aids, and the compression is all operating at the ceiling. Make sure that the output never gets above this level. Wide dynamic range compression, WDRC, the opposite. Mild gain hearing aids, weak hearing aids meant for outer hair cell damage. So that's what we're going to be looking at in a couple of weeks from now. Then we will take and look at a summary of two twins, Billy and Tilly. Okay, those are two types of wide dynamic range compression. And WDRC is, of course, much more popular than output limiting because more people have mild to moderate loss than severe. And we'll look at programmable and multi-channel hearing aids. So you can see where I'm expanding the title there, programmable and multi-channel. We'll spend a week on that, and then we'll spend 1 week on Unit 4. And Unit 4 is how quickly does the hearing aid go into compression? Does it go into compression gradually, or does it go into compression right away? There's all different approaches to that. Then you'll have your midterm, likely, something like that. And then we get into our digital hearing aids and how they use compression. So really a lot of this stuff is a lot of history. From here through here is a lot of history of how compression began and how it was used on analog hearing aids. And once you've got that, it's like, okay, now you got the building blocks. Now let's focus on how is all that technology combined into today's digital hearing aids. Whoops, don't want to do that. Okay, so how is it? And then we'll look at digital noise reduction, because all hearing aids today have digital noise reduction. What is that crap? How does it work? What does it do? Does it really improve speech recognition? Does it really remove all of the noise and leave the speech alone? Is there really such a thing as a digital claw that can come in and remove the noise and leave the speech? What's the biggest problem people have with hearing aids? Speech in noise. So when digital came out, it was the big promise. Ooh, we get to use digital noise reduction. And then the newspapers were advertising, remove noise. And then the Surgeon General got in, your USA Surgeon General, and said, you guys are lying. You have no proof. You haven't got a shred of evidence in research to show that the hearing aids are removing background noise. So guess what? The FDA made all the hearing aid companies change their ads. Then directional microphones, which used to be out, were reinvented. Because the year that digital, I remember this as clear as a bell. I remember going to a conference in Utah, Salt Lake City, American Academy of Audiology. Now, I was working for Unitron Canada. I was working for a company called Unitron. And digital noise reduction, digital hearing aids came out in '97. So here was the American Academy of Audiology conference. There was like 8,000 people there. And Widex, the company called Widex, I call them Windex, but Widex came out with a digital hearing aid called the Senso by Widex, the Widex Senso, S-E-N-S-O. And their big mascot was a killer whale, a black and white killer whale. I don't know why. Maybe the white was the noise and the black was the speech. I don't know. But that was, and they were giving out little fluffy teddy bear like whales. You know, everybody's walking around with these whales. And all the engineers from the companies and the competitors were wailing and crying, because they've got digital noise reduction. We're screwed. They've got a digital hearing aid. It's 1997. 1998 was the most happy year for all the competitors that didn't have digital hearing aids, because digital noise reduction didn't work. Didn't remove the noise. So guess what came back? We're back, was directional mics. that pick up the sound in front. And all of a sudden, the hearing aid companies were all doing backstrokes, trying to slap on directional mics onto their digital hearing aids because DNR, digital noise reduction, didn't work. But DNR does make the listener feel better, subjectively, in his or her heart. You just feel better in noise. And if you feel better in noise, you're going to wear the hearing aids. And if you don't feel better, you're not going to wear the hearing aids. So guess what? DNR has a place. It's the heart. And digital noise, I should say directional microphones, has a place. It's the head. So one's the science, one's the art. One's the head, one's the heart. And together they make a good team. One's subjective and the other one's objective. And that's kind of how you should think about the two things of digital noise reduction versus directional mics. And that's why we cover a week or two here. And then Unit 7 is directional microphones and DNR combined. Directional microphones and DNR combined. The last unit is the last chapter of my book, the last chapter of this weird thing that you've all come to love and hate, okay? And it's called Adro. And Adro is actually sold by HLT, Sam's Club. It's the hearing aid sold by Hearing Aid Lab Technologies. And guess what? It's linear. It's gone all the way back. It doesn't use compression. And it uses linear in a unique way, not in the same way that the original linear hearing aids were. It's different. But it's a totally different approach, and it is chapter 10 in my book. It's the last chapter. I call it the Tabasco. It's the Tabasco of the sauce. It's kind of like, okay, this is different. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're going in this course. Angela, yes, what?
I would like to know when you're going to come see me in Missouri and sign my book.
You don't want that.
I do want that. You're very important to me.
Well, the next time I come down to the MHS conference, which is in March. Now, I believe last year it was in Kansas City.
Okay.
I think this year it's going to be in Springfield. I think. Yeah. MHS. Okay. So that's where I have been invited to speak. So I'll likely see you there.
Awesome.
Cool.
Can I get a backstage pass?
Yeah. Let's see what other set of lies I can tell you here. Let's share screen here. And why don't we look at linear versus compression. So here is the notes. And the PowerPoint is this. And this would be the PowerPoint. When you look at recent advances in hearing aids, I'll start off with this slide. This is kind of interesting. In the 1960s, hearing aids were BTEs. They were all linear. They were all what they call Class A or B amplifiers, which is a chintzy, noise-filled amplifier. We won't go much into that, but they're just saying it was an amplifier that made a lot of noise. And the first directional microphones were actually used. In the 1970s, so you can see this is the decades and this is the technology. In the 1970s, clunky ITEs appeared. The very first compression appeared, and it was all OLC, output limiting compression. WDRC wasn't invented until the late 1980s. That's when outer hair cell knowledge became distinct. That's when scientists figured out the difference between inner and outer hair cells. Class D amplifiers were quieter. In the canal, hearing aids appeared, and the first programmable hearing aids appeared. They were analog, but you could program them with a computer. Okay? Then in the 90s, CICs appeared. Multi-channel appeared along with programmable. And look at this, the end of the analog era, 1996 to 97. And then D-mics returned. And digital all took the floor completely. All styles, mostly WDRC, multi-channel, programmable, digital noise reduction. And then from 2000 to today, RICs, open fit BTEs, personal sound amplification products. So digital continues, all types of compression, something called expansion. We'll talk about that. Anti-feedback reduction, digital feedback reduction. And the fitting software has become king. Look where I'm circling. Yes, circus. It is a circus. The software is now king. Remember when we learned about ANSI testing? Do you remember learning about ANSI testing? ANSI testing tests the hardware of your hearing aid. ANSI tests the mic, the amp, the receiver. But today's hearing aids aren't just hardware. Today's hearing aids are software. Just like your computer. It has a monitor, it has a fan, it has a CPU, it has a mouse. That's hardware. The software is your apps and PowerPoint and Microsoft Word and Excel. Well, in analog, you didn't have software. The hearing aids were all hardware. And so ANSI was king. I mean, ANSI was, to cuss, king shit of Turd Island. Because hearing aid, that's all hearing aids were mics, amps, receivers. So you could do low cut, you could do high cut, you could adjust the gain. Yeah, you could make them programmable, but that's all you could adjust. Today, the hearing aids are all digital. And because they're all digital, the software becomes king. And guess what we've done? We've done a frontal lobotomy on ourselves. Now, I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. You know what I'm saying? Because we've become stupid. We've let the software reign. The software has become king. And now audiologists, a lot of them, don't know their compression anymore because you don't have to. You're sitting there with the software going, does your client have trouble hearing the preacher every second Sunday at a 45-degree angle at a distance of 30 feet? If so, push this button. You have no idea what went on. You're just answering questions. Is your client the quiet, introverted type? If so, push this button. It's like, what? It's all become psychosocial, like hippy-dippy, like, here, smoke one on. It's just like, what have you done? It's like we've lost that love and feeling. We've lost our knowledge of hearing aids because now software has become king, and the questions it's asking are all psychosocial, and we don't always know what took place in the black box when we pushed the button. And that's why I'm such a fan of Real Ear. That's why your 250 course next semester is hugely important, because that's where you're going to measure with a tube in the guy's ear, what did the software really do? What did it do? When you pushed that button, what happened to the gain? What happened to the output? What did you see with your eyes? What happened on the screen? And let me be honest with you. I'll bet you 70% of HISs in the state of Missouri do not use Real Ear. Okay? Most of them don't. They don't know how. They never got trained. They don't know how. They let the software rule. The software does the walking and the talking. And they're using QuickFit. They're letting the software ask the questions, and they're pushing the button. Okay, here you go. Healed, Jesus. Here, wear the hearing aids. And then they're sitting there in the office when the client comes back. Well, how does that sound? Well, how does that sound? And they're making other adjustments. How does that sound? What do you mean, how does that sound? Why don't you measure what's going on in the ear with the hearing aid in place? Real ear measurement. And then you'll see what's going on. And you'll see maybe a spike taking place at some frequencies. Well, that's no good. I better reduce that spike. And you wouldn't know unless you did Real Ear and saw it. And that's the difference. That's kind of the epistle that I'm going to keep hammering down, because it separates the grown-ups from the kids. And there's a lot of people out there who are operating as kids, because they don't know their hearing aids. They got into it through their daddy's business or something, and they took some IHS Mickey Mouse course, and they're sitting out there learning from manufacturers, and manufacturers are not always telling what's going on. So they end up being kind of in trouble that way. So here we go. Let's look at linear gain, and let's look at some of this stuff that we're talking about. Linear versus compression. Here's your readings. Okay? Read those very carefully. Once you've read them, read them again. Okay? Read it twice. They're not long. It's pages 104 to 109 and pages 201 to 208. This is not a lot of reading. It's called 12 pages in total. Okay? But do read it because it's very important. You won't get it unless you do. Remember this stuff from acoustics. Okay? Gain is dB. Output is dBSPL. Remember, remember, remember. Okay? Input plus gain is output. Input and output are absolute dB values right here. They are referenced to 0. And you all know what 0 is. The softest it took for a normal hearing human to hear a 1,000 hertz tone at 1 meter distance with 2 ears. That's 0. Any sound that's referenced to that ground is some dBSPL. Okay? Whether it's a whisper, whether it's speech, whether it's yelling. So if you're talking 30 dBSPL, you're talking 60 dBSPL, 90 dBSPL, all of those are related to the ground, which is 0. If you want to say an apartment building is twice as tall as a house, you have to know where the ground is. The ground is 0 dBSPL. Any decibel value referenced to that ground is dBSPL, not dB, dBSPL. So input to the hearing aid, like whatever's coming into the mic, that's input. It's measured in dBSPL. Output from the hearing aid, from the receiver, output that's hitting your eardrum, dBSPL, just like input. But the gain is relative. Gain is just dB. And think about it like time. And I know I told you this last year in acoustics. So here goes again, because I told you then that I'd say it now. Think about time. You're on Central Standard Time. I'm on Pacific Standard Time. Okay? These are absolute time values. So if it's 2 p.m. by me, it's 4 p.m. in Springfield, Missouri. Okay? Those are absolute time values. Now, I can't add those together. What's 4 p.m. plus 6 p.m.? It doesn't make any sense. I can't add those together. But think of a relative time value, 2 hours. I can add 2 hours to 4 p.m., now it's 6 p.m. I can add 2 hours to 6 p.m., now it's 8 p.m. So I can add a relative and an absolute together, like 1 plus 2 is 3. So I can say input plus gain is output. Okay? So I can say an input of 50 dBSPL plus a gain of 50 is an output of 100 dBSPL. 50 and 50 is 100. Okay? But I can't take two SPL values and add them together like that. You'll remember from acoustics. 90 dBSPL plus 90 dBSPL, what's the sum total? 93. Remember that in acoustics? It's like one machine making 90 dBSPL, another machine in the other corner of the room making 90 dBSPL, sum total 93. So you can't do, it's not going to be 180. Okay? Because those are two SPL values. You can't add them together like 1 plus 2 is 3. But you can add an absolute and a relative. Angela, yes, you had a question.
Yes, now that you reminded me of the 3 extra, not just 90 dBSPL, but 93.
Yep.
That also rings my bell. There was a 6.
Yep, that's if the two sounds are identical.
Yes.
So if I had one machine here and an identical machine here making 90, then my sum total is 96.
6, okay.
But you can never assume that they're going to be identical. So basically, if they're not identical, you go up by 3. Okay, and this is good. This is good review. I'm glad we're doing. This ain't no waste of time at all, as far as I'm concerned. It's not. This is the stuff that people need to internalize. Think of a choir. Some lady, 70 dB SPL. What's 10 ladies going to be? Okay. What happens when you increase your sound pressure by a factor of 10? You go up 20. But the ladies are different ladies. They're not identical ladies. So now you're not going to go up by 20, you're going to go up by 10. So 10 ladies singing at 70 dB SPL is a sum total of 80. Okay? If they're all identical ladies, if they were clones, 10 ladies at 70 would equal a total of 90. This is why a choir isn't going to make you deaf. Okay? Because you have 100 people singing in a choir, please don't add them all together or you're going to have smashed eardrums. Okay? Good. That's what I need you to internalize and remember that from last year. Because this stuff builds on acoustics, but it's not totally all acoustics. It's just sort of... So, that's what I need you to take a look at. There it is. All of this stuff is history. You've seen all of that crap before, so we don't need to look at it. I'm not going to quiz you on it. I'm not going to throw, what's the formula for dBSPL on any quiz in this course? You've had that in 110. So I'm not, but this is just review. And I just want you to take a look at it because it verbalizes here what I'm saying out loud to you. Okay? Good. I'll scroll down, and then you'll see this here. You cannot simply add 2 dBSPL values together. E.g., one machine making 85 and another one making 85 is a sum total of 88. There you go. You went up by 3. There you have it. So this stuff I'm just going to charge for you to read it. Just take a look at your notes right here and just review this for yourselves, which is good. We need to cut to the chase and talk about input-output functions, but that top half of the page is kind of like review from 110. So now when we kind of leave that alone for a second, and you look at the bottom third of page 1 here, you're going to see what I've got grayed out. And it says input plus gain equals output. To understand input-output functions, I/O functions. To understand linear versus compression, you gotta know input-output functions. So let's take a look at what those are. Take a peek, see at what it is. Let's cut to the chase here. Down, 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 down. Input-output functions. Here you go. Here's an I/O function. Okay, linear gain. It's just some hearing aid. Let's just call it hearing aid X. Could be, it's most likely linear because they don't make digital linear hearing aids anymore. Digital hearing aids are all compression with the exception of that chapter 10 HLT ADRO business. But look at linear hearing aids, okay? Input is always on the horizontal. Output is always on the vertical. And the frequency is always 2000 hertz. Okay? The why 2000 hertz? Because 2000 hertz is right in the center of speech. It's right where the vowels and consonants meet. If you had to have one frequency that you could hear, it would be 2 grand. Because 2000 hertz is the most important frequency for hearing and understanding speech. Of the 4 Gospels, 500, 1000, 2004, the greatest of these is 2. Okay, faith, hope, and love, the greatest of these is love. Okay, just think about it biblically. Doesn't matter, I don't care, as long as you get it. Here it goes. Share screen, linear. Now look at the left-hand corner. The left corner has a 0 and a 60. It doesn't have to read 0 and 60. I just chose it to, just to give you an example. This is a linear hearing aid that's giving 60 dB of gain. 0 input gives an output of 60. Okay, that's a gain of 60. Input should be in dBSPL, outputs in dBSPL, 0 dBSPL input to this fictitious hearing aid. The fictitious hearing aid is giving a gain of 60, so my output is 60 dBSPL. Okay, now look at 20. 20 in is 80 out. What's my gain? I'm asking you. What's your gain? 60. 60. 20 in, 80 out, gain is 60. 40 in, 100 out, what's my gain?
Still 60.
60, thank you. 60 in, 120 out, what's my gain? 60. That's why they called it linear gain. Get it? Cool. Like in grade 10 math, y equals mx plus b. 45-degree angle. Every input corresponds to exactly the same kind of output. It's tit for tat, tit for tat. As my input went up by 20, my output went up by 20. Input went up by another 20, my output went up by another 20. So 20 over 20 is like 1 to 1. So that's what the compression ratio here is, 1 to 1. Linear gain. That's why they called it linear gain. It gave the same gain for all inputs. Linear. Until, for example, the output might be 120. Oh, well, now you're going to cause hearing loss. Better stop the output from increasing. Don't let it go out anymore. Keep it at 120 so that even as my input went up by another 20, my output didn't go up by 1 jot or tittle. My input went up by another 20. Sorry, the output ain't moving. And why did they do this? To stop the client from getting more hearing loss. And they called that peak clipping. That flat white line that you saw was called peak clipping. And I'll show you a picture of what peak clipping looked like. Maybe we can find that puppy. Here you go. Peak clipping. Look at the top. Here's the sound wave getting bigger, getting bigger, getting bigger until finally the hearing aid said, enough. Sorry. Sorry, I'm not moving. Look what you did to your sine wave. You made it a square. Little Jack Horner sat in the corner and got a square ass. What happened? You turned a round wave into a square wave. What happens when you do that? Remember acoustics? You studied triangle waves, square waves, sawtooth waves. When you take a simple sound, like a pure tone, and you suddenly cut off its peaks, you've made it square. And as soon as you've made it square, you've got more than one frequency. So 500 hertz coming into the hearing aid is no longer 500 hertz only coming out. It's no longer a little 500 hertz coming in and a big 500 hertz coming out. It's a little 500 hertz coming in, a big 500 hertz coming out, and a little 1,000 hertz, and a little 1,500 hertz, and a little 2,000 hertz. You've invited Mary to the party, but guess what? Mary brought her kids. Shit, that's not what you had in mind. Do you understand? That's called harmonic distortion. That's what you're measuring in ANSI. That's one of your 5 ANSI measures. OSPL 90, full-on gain, reference test gain, equivalent input noise, and total harmonic distortion. How much is your hearing aid distorting? What's it doing? Is the input simply a bigger output, but a perfect input, just larger? You're adding crap, C-R-A-P. And the thing that adds the most crap was peak clipping. So you've heard peak clipping. We've all heard it. You go to carnivals or some cheap old store and there's a speaker blaring and the speaker's going, bah! That's peak clipping. That is peak clipping. The diaphragm in the speaker is no longer free to move. Now the diaphragm is literally slapping the walls of the speaker. So the sinusoid excursions of the speaker are made into squares. I'm calling you from the bottom of the pool. Hello, how are you? That's peak clipping. So linear sounded beautiful until it peak clipped. And as soon as it peak clipped, the guy's going, oh shit, he's trying to turn it down. And now he's turned it down, and now the person's whispering, oh, now I got to turn it up again. Well, that's too loud. It sounds like crap. Turn it down. So the listener with linear hearing aids was, oh, you could tell a linear hearing aid wearer because his or her hand was always at the volume control, constantly. Okay, because the gain was linear. It was the same gain for a whisper as for average conversational speech. So if you set the hearing aid so that average conversational speech sounded great, and the person started to whisper, it wasn't enough. The guy had to crank it up. And if the guy started yelling, now my gain is too much because now it's hit peak clipping. Well, better turn it down. Okay, hence compression. Okay, so linear means the same gain for all inputs, and the MPO, the maximum power output, was limited by means of peak clipping. And peak clipping sounded awful. It distorted. And you could tell a linear hearing aid wearer because his or her hand was always at the volume control. Soft wasn't amplified by enough, and loud inputs were amplified by too much, causing peak clipping, so you'd have to turn it down. That's the mark of linear. The mark of the beast. Okay? Look at compression. What compression did was to limit the maximum output without peak clipping. Okay? So instead of doing this, it tried to do this. So you've kept the waves rounded. You weren't cutting them off. You weren't making them square. Okay? And it was a way of limiting the MPO of the hearing aid, the maximum power output of the hearing aid, without the use of peak clipping. So the first type of compression used was output limiting. That's a close cousin to linear. All hearing aids were linear, and then the first kind of compression, its focus was limiting the MPO, the maximum power output, but without using peak clipping. And here's what it looked like on an I/O function. There you go. Notice how the red line goes a little bit up. So now pretend you've got a 60 decibel gain hearing aid, linear gain again. As the input went up to 20, the output went up to 80. As the input went to 40, the output went to 100. As the input went to 60, the output went to 120. You've got 1-to-1 linear gain happening here, tit for tat, no change from this picture here. No change whatsoever. The difference is in the red line. Okay? Instead of hard peak clipping, this hearing aid, as the song used to say, give a little bit of your love. It gave a little bit. So as my input increased by 20, my output increased by a little bit. And as my input increased by another 20, my output went up by a little bit. So you can almost think about it like a rapids in a river. You've got the raging river flowing this way, and you've got a little bit of a back current, kind of a rapid, sort of fighting against the flow. And that's how compression was described. Another way of describing it is this. Instead of having a cement ceiling and having little Teddy jumping up and down on the bed, banging his head on the cement ceiling, maybe mom said, I'm going to put a piece of sponge on the ceiling. So that when Teddy jumps up and down on the bed, Teddy's going, brr, brr, brr. There's a little bit of a sponge. There's a little bit of a mercy. Okay? So what compression did was it limited the MPO by giving way a little bit. And that's how you read compression. The corner is called the knee point, just like a knee in a leg. It's where the line bends. And you remember from math in high school, this is the horizontal axis, the abscissa. This is the vertical or the ordinate. And the line in the graph is called the function. And you have a linear function, and you have a knee point, and now you have another linear function. This is your compression. Okay? Here, the previous graph, you're not using any compression. You're using hard peak clipping. And here, you're using output limiting compression. And let's figure out what it is. As my input went up by 20, have a look here. As my input went up by 20, how much do you think my output went up by? Let's kind of pick a number together. So if I look at 120 here, and I look at this right here, how much do you think that is? Does that kind of look like about 125? What would you guess? It's close enough. Let's pretend it's 125. If this is 120, let's pretend this is 125. Okay, so if my input went up by 20 and my output went up by 5, that's a 20 to 5 compression ratio, right? As my input went up by 20, my output went up by 5. The first number is always what happened to your input. The second number is what happened to your output. So it's a 20 to 5 compression ratio. Let's boil that down to 1. 20 over 5 is equal to x over 1. What's x? Well, let me figure it out. 20 over 5 is equal to x over 1. Let's cross multiply. 20 times 1 is 20. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Right? 20 over 5 is equal to x over 1. So what's x? 4. It's a 4 to 1 compression ratio. That's what this is. So what's my knee point? 60. It happened at 60. And what's my compression ratio? 4 to 1. And that, my fine feathered friends, is how we read compression. Knee point, ratio. Knee point is the when of compression. When did it occur? It didn't occur at 20 inputs. It didn't occur at 40 inputs. It occurred at 60 in this particular case. That's when it began. And how much is the ratio? 20 to 5 or 4 to 1. Okay? So compression is read in two things: the knee point and the ratio. The knee point is the when of compression. The ratio is the how much of compression. Now, this was not taught to me very well. When I learned this, I hated it. And I swore I was going to kill the person who was trying to teach me. And I said to myself, self, if I ever have to teach this, I'm going to teach it in a way that I wish to God someone had taught me. And that is why I'm going painstakingly, really thoroughly through it. Because by the time you're done this course, you will know compression as well as the AUD grad from Missouri State University. Okay, I promise. They don't learn it any better than I do. In fact, I speak at their frickin' conferences. So it is the same. Okay, you're getting compression from somebody who hated math, who went to high school remedial math for 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, and I don't care, right, because it doesn't take a genius to teach this stuff. I just was poorly taught, and I refuse to have that happen to anybody else. So it's not hard. This is not calculus. It's not trigonometry. This is just simple arithmetic. But you have to understand it, because input-output functions are the language of compression. And I didn't make it up. I'm serious. ANSI did. Blame ANSI. Okay? So these are all just kind of weird things here. Let's go to your writing. Let's go to your, I should say, yeah, let's do it. Go to your writing. I want to go to here again and go to your notes. So I want to get out of here. Okay, go to your notes. Okay. Let's read this stuff now. Just from what we've talked about, let's just read this. To understand linear versus compression, you got to know input-output functions. To understand input-output functions, you got to internalize that input plus gain is output. I/O functions describe how a hearing aid provides gain for various inputs, soft, average, and loud. All hearing aids have amplifiers that provide gain. Input is speech and other noise that enters the hearing aid mic. Gain is the work that the hearing aid amplifier does. Output is the sum total of input plus gain. Be sure that it does not cause loudness discomfort. Input-output functions for linear hearing aids show a linear function. The function is always at a 45-degree angle. Increases to input correspond directly and evenly to increases in output, i.e. the gain stays the same for all inputs. I/O functions for compression show a non-linear function. The slope is no longer at 45 degrees. As inputs increase, the outputs also increase, but by a lesser amount. Concepts of linear versus compression pervade all hearing aid specs, all hearing aid software, ANSI, and Real Ear. In other words, everything. Okay? This is the sum total of it. You could make it all biblical. With a knee point so low, you can't get under it. Compression so wide, you can't get around it. All right. In all hearing aid specs, there are two kinds of graphs. One's frequency response. The other one's input-output function. So let's look at frequency response graphs. Just so here's a frequency response. Have a look at this one. Okay, read what the axis says. Be very critical here. Look at what it says. Frequency is on the horizontal. Gain is on the vertical. And see how gain is listed as dB? Not dBSPL, dB. Okay, because gain is a relative dB value. I can add 50 dB gain to a 10 dB SPL input. I can add 50 dB gain to a 20 dB SPL input. I can add 50 to a 30 dB SPL input, and so on. Okay, gain is relative. That's why I can add the absolute and relative together, like 1 plus 2 is 3. And we're lucky. We're the ones that can do that. Because people who are measuring sound in factories, they're measuring dBSPL only. And those are the poor suckers that have to go 90 and 90 is 93. You and I don't. We're fitting hearing aids. Input plus gain is output. So you're adding relative value to an absolute. We get to do 1 plus 2 is 3. 50 input plus 50 gain is 100 output. Cool. Gotta like that. All right, next. Now, here we go. So here it's showing you a frequency response, and it's talking about the volume control. Whether the volume control is at number 1, or number 2, or 3, or 4. And you can just see how your gain went up in terms of a frequency response. And look, they're saying the input sound pressure level. Look at the mistake here. It's supposed to say 50 dB SPL, not 50 dB. Okay, there's a mistake. So I should have asked you what the mistake was on the grid. No point, no matter. Okay. Now you go to the next picture. This is the same thing, but on an input-output function. Same, identical. This is in frequency response. This is I/O graph. Effective volume control adjustment, effective volume control adjustment. In Polish or in German. Just two different languages, okay? Here, you don't have, they're not talking, they're stating what the input is, they're stating what the gain is, and they're not stating what the output is. You'd have to figure it out. You'd have to go, okay, if the input is 50, let's look at 1,000. Look at number 1. If the input is 50 and my gain is about 35, okay, I guess my output must be 85. I guess. If 50 in, and I'm looking at this peak here, and it's at about 35, So 50 dB SPL plus 35 dB equals 85 dB SPL. Yeah, I can figure out what the output is, but it's not stating it. Okay, the next graph, it is. But it's not, it's just a different read. So let's look at what would happen, let's say, for 50 coming in. If my volume is low, turn it down, turn it down, turn it down. So my input is 50. Look at the 50 right here. What's my output? About 85. 85 minus 50 must be a gain of 35. Told you. Okay? I'm serious. This is from a hearing aid company. I did not make up these graphs. This is from a manufacturer of hearing aids. I'm just trying to teach you how to read the graphs. Okay? And it's not rocket science, but it has to be read. Look at this. Watch what happens at volume control number 4. 50 in. Oh, wow. That's about 110 out. 50 in and 110 out. What's the gain? If 50 is coming in and 110 is coming out, what's the difference between the two? 60. So let's look at this here. If 50 is coming in, what's coming out? Okay? This is what I'm getting a gain here, a lot of gain happening here. Okay? So when you're looking at this stuff, actually the input-output graphs are always focusing at what's happening at 2,000 hertz. So let's go look at 2,000 hertz at 50 dB coming in. My output here is almost about, my gain is almost, is over 60 some. Okay? So what I'm trying to show you is as these lines go to the left, my gain is going up. If 50 coming in here is 85 coming out, that's a gain of 30. If 50 coming in here is about 110 coming out, that's a gain of 60. Do you see what I'm saying? Look at 40. Take 40 for example. 40 coming in is about, okay, this is 60, this is 70. 40 coming in is about 75 coming out. That's at the one line. Crank it up to number 4. 40 coming in is 100 out. My gain is 60. Look at the one line again. 40 in, 85 out. My gain is 35. 40 coming in, and my output is 75. That's what it is. 40 coming in, my output is 75. My gain is 35. 75 minus 40 is 35. Now look at when the volume was cranked way up. 40 in was 100 out. What's the difference between 40 and 100? 60. So that's the last thing I will part with you today, is the weird thing. As these diagonal lines go left, your gain goes up. It is the opposite of what you'd think. That's the point I'm trying to drag home here. As when you're looking at input-output functions, as your 45-degree angles go to the right, your gain, your linear gain is going down. If your 45-degree angle goes to the left, your gain is going up. And just let the graph tell the story. Smoke a J, no, I should say talk to Buddha, take a chill pill, and let the picture talk to you. And let's do it the last time. 40 in, 75 out. I guess the difference is 35. 40 in and 100 out. I guess the gain must be 60. I guess that's what the graph says. So let the picture talk. Just let it tell you. Don't sit there figuring out why and everything. The thing in this course to understand input-output functions is to let the graph talk to you. And to let it talk to you, you have to read it. You have to listen to it. You have to look at what the axis is, and look at what the axis is, and read the function. So it's a gear that some people find hard to shift into. But give yourself patience, because what we are going to do next week is we will cover this. We're going to be talking about linear gain. I'm going to be giving you an example. We'll be talking a little bit more about distortion. And then the following week, what I want to do is practice with input-output functions. In other words, we're going to just be looking at, here, practice. Practice. I'll be showing you graphs like this. Let it pull up. Sometime today would be nice. I'm going to be showing you pictures. I'm going to be asking you questions like this. And I'm going to be showing you a picture like this. And I'm going to ask, with this picture, I'm going to ask you to answer these questions. And then with a picture like this, I'm going to ask you these questions. Let's look at this picture, answer these questions. Okay? That's basically what we're going to, this is the end of unit 1, where we look at the practice reading input-output functions. It's a language, you'll gradually get used to it. The most friendly and easy graphs to understand, of course, are frequency responses. I mean, look at this. Here, frequency response. Look at this, frequency response. Easy. I mean, you can see that these controls adjust the treble. You can see that this control adjusts the whole maximum power output. So frequency response graphs are friendly and easier to understand. Things get a little more cerebral when you're looking at input-output functions. They just get a little strange. Okay? Anyway, enough on that. Enough for today. I think we should bid adieu. I'll stop right now. I think we've, as they say, we've had enough. We had enough. No more for you. No more for me. I need a beer. All right. It's been great seeing you all again. It's a good day. I always look forward to these. I know you don't look forward to seeing me, but I look forward to seeing you all. So I hope I didn't piss you off too much. I think it's all good. Maybe they'll fire me because I've been cussing too much on the screen today. I think I've said about 3 swear words today. It's been, but don't tell Rebecca. Okay. Anyway, I will stop recording, and we'll see you all next week, okay?
All right, stay safe.
Hey, you too. Yeah.